We are off and running, pun intended, at the NFL Combine. We're talking about it here on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who have helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. It is Friday, February 27th, about 5:30 in the morning. Testing went last night, on-field drills for the first day. I got quarterbacks in about 2 hours at the podiums. We're going to go to Ty Simpson and Drew Aller as two of the guys that I'm planning on stopping in and checking in on, Sawyer Robertson. So busy day here on Friday, but we are off and running, just not proverbially, but physically with the testing last night. And I wanted to dive into, because this is such a dire need for the Dolphins, right? I wanted to kind of get into some of the names that really stood out to me throughout the course of this week at that position. Now that those guys have checked all the boxes, the guys that are going to work out, there's some trends on players up. There's some trends on players down that I think or maybe had some guys in similar tiers and valuations that you were looking for separation, right? Who's going to use the pre-draft process to separate themselves for better or for worse? This is starting to happen with some of these guys. And I think it does set the stage for Miami, where you could take the pick at 11, you could take the pick at 43, you could take the pick at 75, 87, 90. And my list is a little more narrow now. And that's the whole point of the pre-draft process as a whole, right? Is to be able to find qualifiers and disqualifiers. So I'm going to jump in to the edge rush and linebacker group with some names that I thought helped themselves this week. And for me, I really have to start with Malachi Lawrence, the edge rusher from UCF, who told folks at the podium with his media availability that he played between 255 and 260 pounds, came in at 153, ran really well, ran a 4.52, but it's how you watch him play to go with the explosiveness that he has. He's got this slashing style, but he's got some length as a pass rusher that really pops when you get into obvious drop back passing sets. So what I like about a guy like him is I don't think Malachi Lawrence is going to come at the cost of a top 50 pick. I think because he's not super complete as a run defender yet, but because he plays high, I still feel like he can grow into it. But his immediate role at the NFL level is probably going to be that of a pass rusher off the edge, because he's got a pretty dynamic first step. And he can challenge you in a lot of ways. So pick 75, like he went to the Shrine Bowl and had a great week at the Shrine Bowl. I think he's definitely trending up towards, like if he's there at 75, I think he's in that conversation of a best player available option who also happens to play a position of need for the Dolphins. Needless to say, I mentioned pick 11. It's probably time to start blowing kisses to your Sonny style dreams at 11. If you were a fan that was a really big fan of the idea of Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State, obviously had a super prolific workout. He did win at 245 pounds, went over 11 feet in the broad jump and jumped 43.5 inches in the vertical. and then ran out and ran a 4.46 as a former safety who plays linebacker. There's not a lot of guys in this year's class that are going to have no holes on their resume. And I think the only thing that you can ding Sonny Styles for, if you're going to sit here and be like super nitpicky, is just the fact that he plays an off-ball linebacker spot. But he does have versatility, and Ohio State used him in a bunch of ways. So that's one of those ones, if he falls into your lap at 11, you very eagerly, greedily don't take a lot of time on the clock, and you run that card in really fast. But I think we'll probably look back at February 26th as the day the Sonny Styles to Dolphins mock draft projections came to an end, because I don't think you're going to see him mocked. I mean, you could go with Saleh and the Titans at 4. You could go with the Commanders at 7, right? Like that off-ball linebacker situation could use a prolific player. Cincinnati at 10. I just think there's too many hurdles to get through now, in my opinion. So you could probably kiss Sonny Styles goodbye. I think Malachi Lawrence helped himself quite a bit. There is one player, though, that I'm fading pretty quick. We're going to talk about him after the break, after I talk about one more name that I think helped himself relative to who he is as a player and where he's at in his career. And that's Keldrick Falk, who's projected to be a first-round pick. The pass rush profile is not particularly developed. But I think when you see a body type, right, like as you get a chance, you see these guys without pads. And some of these guys have like the really bricked up shoulders and backs, and they're super high developed. What I noticed with Keldrick Falk was he had a lot of his mass below his waistline. So he's got a thick lower half, and he's got, I don't want to say underdeveloped, but like proportionally his weight sits further down. He's somebody that I really think can grow into his frame. And if you're projecting for what he is now and then potentially what he can be because he's only 20 years old, when he continues to grow out his frame, I'm not super concerned about getting quality NFL reps. Now, are you going to get a quality NFL pass rush? Like, that's the question. And I don't obviously have that answer. But as I looked at Keldrick Falk, I said, wow, you can tell he's just like a pup still, as far as growing into all of the frame that he has as just a 20-year-old, where the lower body's really well developed. So he's got that power, and you see that power when you watch him play. But he's a taller player. He's not going to be the most bendy pass rusher off the edge. He's not going to run the figure 8 drill like a 243-pound guy, like a Romello Height or someone like that. It's really a different position, right? And I think if you want to be front multiple down the road, that's the kind of player that I think you can very easily see that pathway to getting there with. He's not going to be one of my favorite options at 11, but if you were to find a way to manipulate the board or maybe move down, if your blue chip players all come off before you make your first pick, I think he is a player that does warrant conversation and consideration. Going to go to break. On the other side of the break, we're going to talk about a player that I am out on, and it might not be the one you're worried that it is. We'll talk about that next. Make sure you guys stick with us. If you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2 with flights, tickets, the whole deal, the whole experience. If you're looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep playoff run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year. It adds excitement to every game down the stretch. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So there were two pass rushers that came in exceptionally short with the arm length. One of them was Rueben Bain. And I want to start by saying Rueben Bain is not the guy we're going to be talking about on this segment of the show. But it does highlight one of another compounding concern that I have for the first round pass rusher that he gets mocked a lot in the teens, kind of floats around like the Dolphins area. It's Cassius Howe from Texas A&M. I just do not see a physical fit in any capacity. Like, he is an awesome speed rusher off the edge. And if he can ghost dip you, and if he could turn the corner and you get him out in wide alignments and play wide 9, it's about 250 pounds. Watch the LSU game from last year if you want to know what Cassius Howe's game is all about. He was dominant in that game. But watching that game versus zooming out and watching the rest of the season and how he plays the run, and then he comes into the combine and he runs he ran well, but he measures with 30.25-inch arms, which is like the shortest arm length measurement of like the last 20 years. And you see it on tape because he's a space player. And then you try to run at him and he struggles to get off of blocks. And you watch him and he's in certain edge defensive opportunities, he's 8 yards up the field on the edge and they're just running through the B gap because he just ran up the field. And all you got to do is kind of get attached and ride him out. So there's a lot of splash plays. And I think there's a role for Cassius Howe at the NFL level. But here's the difference with a length issue for Cassius Howe and then a length issue in my eyes and how I see both players with Rueben Bain. And if Rueben Bain somehow, if because he has short arms, if he were to fall to 11, like, I think you run that card in still. Rueben Bain plays with functional power and leverage. And he plays up through. He's not a particularly tall defensive lineman, but he's exceptionally dense. And the density brings power. It brings contact balance. It brings leverage. And not just power like through his legs, power with his hands and how he punches and creates knockback. He's going to put offensive tackles back on their heels. You've seen him do it. So yes, he's a close quarters, hand-to-hand combat player. He's not really a rangy, reachy, finesse, force your hands to miss, turn the corner. Now he can play off your outside shoulder and run through your contact because of how powerful he is against lateral contact. You can't just put a punch on his inside shoulder and knock him off his track on the outside rush. Like you got to get fully into the breastplate and you got to get the anchor and you've got to be able to set your hand and then frame and mirror and try to ride him around the edge. And those are the kinds of rush reps that he'll have a hard time with. But you watch Rueben Bain and the power that he plays with in his hands to give him the space. Like when you knock an offensive tackle back up, you've given yourself more reduced angles to play off of that player's frame to pursue the football. Like if I'm directly on top of you and I set my hands, you've now got to kind of like work laterally to get off of my shoulders. But if you knock me back, your exit angles go from 90 degrees to maybe now you need to go 60 or 50 degrees away from your current alignment to get hipped in a hip relationship with me and then get on to pursue the football. You see that with Rueben Bain. You do not see that with Cassius Howe. So, and even if he's there at 43, I don't think for me, I'm just not going to see Cassius Howe as the right player to fit if we're talking about aspiring to be a front multiple defense. You've already kind of got one tweener-ish type player there in Chop, and obviously from a physical standpoint, he's bigger and longer than what Cassius Howe is. So that's a player for me that you will not see in any more of my projections. I think I had one mock in January or the very beginning of February that had Cassius Howe included on it for the Dolphins. He will not be a player that I am projecting for the Dolphins anymore because of this. And I hope that the league is dumb enough to have 10 teams that ding Rueben Bain because, again, the tape is the tape. And I get it's an outlier from a tape perspective. Peter Woods is another one who's an outlier. There's not a lot of defensive tackles, and he came in under 300 pounds, which I thought was odd, and then didn't test. And he came in lighter than we thought he was. He didn't test. He didn't have good tape in 25 compared to 24. And he had 31 and a quarter inch arms, which is pretty rarefied air. Now, the Dolphins had a formal meeting with him. Woods sat down and did an interview with Josina Anderson, and Josina asked him, like, what team stood out to you in the interviews? And Peter Woods mentioned the Dolphins as being the only team that asked him if he had any questions for them, which I thought was like a cool little peek behind the scenes. And I generally see the appeal of Peter Woods, but between him and Cassius Howe is like smaller than I was hoping, shorter than I was hoping. Peter would surprise me as well, just because of the current state of affairs at defensive tackle. Now, if you overwhelmingly think he's the best player, like, okay. Do I think he is? No. We're going to talk a little bit about Anthony Richardson. It was reported he was given permission by the Colts to seek a trade. We're going to get into that next on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. Welcome to the 5-hour energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy. There is something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number one pick for the 5-hour energy flavor draft. What I love about the 5-hour energy shots is they give you a boost with zero sugar, so you don't have to drink your calories too. And they've got a lot of innovations coming up for future flavors as well. But right now, my number one pick is cherry, the bold cherry candy style flavor with a tart edge. It's a classic red fruit profile with a bright, punchy taste, smooth and easy to recognize. But don't sleep on sour apple if you want something that gives you a little bite back. It's got a crisp, tangy taste, and it's bold, a little sweet with a lot of sour. Find your new favorite flavor of 5-hour energy shots available at 5-hourenergy.com or Amazon. As the Dolphins continue their search for a quarterback, there's two thoughts that I have that are tied to things that are kind of whispers that you hear throughout the course of the week in Indianapolis. And like, I want to make no bones about it. Like, I don't do the insider game. I would much rather just try to give like my authentic thoughts on things as they happen and explore the why of what they're trying to do and how it would work and how it wouldn't. I would much rather kind of apply my lens of just player evaluation as a whole. But I've been in the draft space long enough, and I've been coming to Indy long enough. I've been coming every year since 2017, right? Like, this is, I know how this week works, and I know a lot of things that you'll hear this week are valid, even if a lot of them you don't see come to life because you need the stars to align for these kinds of transactions to click into place. The Dolphins are doing their due diligence on quarterbacks here in Indianapolis, and not just the draft prospects, but like talking to folks around the league, from what I understand. But they're not the only team that's doing that. I think it's interesting that the other team that is so frequently tied to Malik Willis is the Arizona Cardinals. And the Cardinals, from what I've understood and talking to folks this week, are just like the Dolphins, being equally proactive in exploring a trade candidate here or trade candidate there. And I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch, all the reporting on Malik Willis and how it's a foregone conclusion on all the money that he's going to get. But the two teams that have most frequently been kind of tethered to him, both were pretty passive at the podium, with Monty Ossenfort for the Cardinals and John Eric Sullivan of the Dolphins when they were asked about him. And they're doing their due diligence on all these other options that include options for trade instead. So is that because they just don't want to miss out on Malik and then not be prepared to do whatever is next, or are they prepared to do whatever is an alternative to what it's being reported that Malik is going to get? Like, that's where it gets interesting, right? And if those two teams end up not paying Malik Willis, well, then who's going to come in and give him $30 million relative to like what their quarterback situation is and what their cap situation is? Like, the whole thing's going to be very interesting. I'll just say that. But what stands out to me about that pathway for quarterbacks is obviously Anthony Richardson, and the Colts just agreed to allow him to pursue a trade yesterday. Richardson's going to be pretty far down on my list. Obviously, the tools are super, super intriguing. First round pedigree. He's owed $5.38 million in cash this season, which is the last year of his rookie contract. He's got a higher win percentage as a starter, 56%, than he does completion percentage on passes. Injuries have always kind of been a thing. You can go back to the preseason game last year where he busted on a protection and didn't know he was hot, and he took a big hit and he got himself hurt. Right? That feels like if you want to swing for the fences because you're comfortable with the floor of Quinn Ewers, like, okay, like I would have other choices that I would personally prefer, but I think that's it for me. If you're comfortable with the floor of what you saw on tape from Quinn Ewers last year and you want to swing for the fences and hack, like, I can see why you would have that in consideration. I don't expect the Dolphins to be the player there. It sounds like he would really like to go to a place, Richardson, that has like the quarterback rehabilitation reputation. So I don't think this is the player that the Dolphins are destined to have, and I'm not going to be super upset about it relative to some of the other options that are out there if that is the avenue that they choose to go. But I did want to acknowledge Anthony Richardson and say the only way where I think I could say, okay, let's have this conversation if I was John Eric Sullivan or Jeff Hafley would be, I know what the baseline of quarterback play is going to be with what we saw or we think we know with Quinn Ewers. And I'm comfortable with that as our baseline as we try to get the competition rolling. So why don't we go out and get like a one-of-one physical profile and see what happens? But like it just hasn't all, it's so under-repped, such an under-repped player coming out of college. And it shows like in a big way. And for me, if you're moving capital, whether it's a player for player or a pick and a player for a pick, like I would prefer if they were going to do a trade at quarterback that they would do with a pick swap, just so that they're not losing assets. But that's all kind of probably a couple weeks away still. So those are my final thoughts from here on Friday, February 27th here in Indianapolis. Kyle Krabs, appreciate you guys checking in on the show. I'll be back again soon with some more reactions to the combine testing. I hope to see you then, and keep it locked in here on Locked On Dolphins.